All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Embrace the Mirror. Once again, I am Naomi Sodomin, your relationship coach, and I am so excited today. And actually, I'm a little bit nervous because I have Glenn Harrold with me. He is one of the people that has helped me the most in my life. I've been following Glenn for about 15 years. As I have stated before, a lot of you know a little bit about my life now that, I grew up in a very violent home and my father wasn't around. And so there was a lot of things that went on in that house. And as a result, I suffered from depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and constant nightmare. And so I was constantly looking for tools that can help me. And reason why I'm bringing Glenn on is because I know there's a lot of you out there who are like, how do I handle these unhealthy relationships? And these unhealthy relationships, they cause anxiety. They cause you to not be able to sleep. You're constantly thinking about the situation and wanting to control it. And my objective with this video series is to let you know that there are people out there that can help you. And so Glenn is an author. He's a musician. He's an experienced clinical hypnotherapist. And he has a relaxation app that I love. And his relaxation and sleep app has become one of the most famous. It has sold like over a million downloads. Last time I checked, it was up to 1.6. I'm keeping tab on you, Glenn. It was up to 1.6. So ladies and gentlemen, whoever's watching, we want to welcome you to Embrace the Mirror. And I'm going to have Glenn introduce himself and we'll get right into it. Go ahead, Glenn, introduce yourself to them.
Okay, well, my name's Glenn Harrold, and I'm a hypnotherapist, and I have been for 20 years. And it's really interesting hearing what you say there about, your past and, your dysfunctional household, and the problems that came with that, the anxiety that led you into like the healing world, the world of healing. Because my journey was similar. I became a hypnotherapist because I grew up in a very, very dysfunctional household where there was a lot of violence, and I used to run away from home when I was 12 and I'd sleep on the streets. And, then I got into taking drugs because I was hanging around with the wrong kids. I drank myself into such a state that by 17, my liver had stopped working. I woke up one day and I was yellow because I totally, damaged myself. And, all that dysfunction I was carrying around with me, I was just in a bad place and I was hanging around with bad kids because that's all I knew. My environment was that, and I reflected that when I was out on the streets. But, there was something in me that was pulling me to find a solution to that because I didn't want to go through my life. As soon as I hit adulthood, everything turned to stone. Relationships were bad. I couldn't make any money. I was struggling, I had no confidence. The one thing that did help me was that I got into a band at a young age because I was into the punk scene when I was young. And so this angry music kind of spoke to me. And from there, I got into a band, got into a punk band, but it gave me a positive focus, something that I could put my energy into. And so for years, I went off in that direction, in the direction of music. And I had a little bit of success in the early 80s. We won a national pop competition here and I was on telly. And
Yeah, I saw that video.
yeah, I
You
was
did an
actually,
interview. That was in 1983.
I was actually high as a kite in that interview. So it kind of shows you where I was at, and really partly because of the drugs we were doing, the whole thing imploded before we kind of took off. So that journey kind of fizzled out, and then later on, I my first wife, I got married, mid 20s, and we had a baby. And when the baby came along, I realised I needed to get my act together, and I needed to find something, a proper career where I could support my family. And it kind of led me into the world of hypnotherapy because at the time I was doing gigs in pubs and clubs, and we worked with a stage hypnotist. And I was watching this guy, manipulating the audience using hypnosis, and it kind of really intrigued me. And it wasn't that I wanted to do it for entertainment, but I saw in that a tool for healing. And I thought, wow, if I could use this to, heal myself, this could be amazing. So that's always a distinction I make as well with hypnosis. Most people's exposure to it is, the wacky stage hypnotist who will make you
Yeah.
around like a chicken and do crazy things. But the reality is that is a certain type of hypnosis, but the induction there is very, controlling and manipulative. And you
Right.
can't do that kind of hypnosis with everyone. There's only a small percentage that respond to that. But it kind of does demonstrate the power of hypnosis.
Yeah.
With I use hypnosis as a tool for healing. And that's very different. The inductions are different, and the therapy part of it is totally, you use therapy instead of, sort of the entertainment side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that was my sort of salvation when I learned hypnosis. I did a 2-year diploma in London in clinical hypnotherapy. Absolutely loved it, and I, was using self hypnosis. I was clearing a lot of the dysfunction and the shadow energy and
Clearing.
things holding me back from my childhood.
Yeah, I heard you say the word clearing, and I love that word. You know why? Because that was what was happening to me, and when I was going through my dysfunction, I went to see a shrink because I thought, and I would always tell myself, someday when you can afford it, you're going to go see someone and you're going to deal with these problems. So anyway, I went to college, I became a registered nurse, and I was making decent enough money. So I thought I'd go see a shrink. And so I'm thinking I'm going to get resolved. So I go and I see this shrink, and for about 2 years, I'm coming to see the same shrink and I'm telling him the same conversation. But then I realized I wasn't getting resolved and the problem was clearing. I
Yeah.
needed to clear, you know?
Yes, sometimes with the work, that kind of work, it's, the pharmaceuticals just they soften the anxiety, but
Right, right,
they don't get to the heart of the problem.
right.
And the anxiety will always be there because you haven't
Yes.
dealt with the root cause.
Yeah,
And,
because we didn't.
hypnotherapy, the
Hmm.
beauty of that is that you can access things in your unconscious mind that are buried
Yes.
there. Sometimes you don't even realize it. I've done thousands of clients and I've seen things come up in the middle of a session
Yeah,
that they had not realized that, it happened when they were 5 years old or whatever, and it was buried there. And in
right.
the hypnotherapy session where we access the unconscious mind, you can go in there and release that trauma,
Yeah,
or dissociate from it in some way. And it's such a powerful method of healing because once you do that,
right.
the anxiety will dissipate because it's not being fueled by the trauma from the past.
So let me ask you a question, Ben. So it's going into the unconscious mind is what begin the clearing process because that trauma is buried in the subconscious, correct? And when you go in deeper, you're actually clearing it, right? You're bringing it up to the surface, and then the person is better able to deal with it. Do I have that correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly it. In a one-to-one therapeutic setting, if somebody had a phobia or they had some kind of anxiety, I would discuss this with them, as an introduction. And then, once I had a fair idea of what the cause of it was, or even if I don't, you can still uh, go into the unconscious mind and start to use what we call hypnoanalytics
Hypnoanalytic.
to find, you're kind of analyzing somebody in an
Right.
unconscious state to find out where the root cause of this trauma is.
Yeah.
And for me, that was always the most powerful method of healing because once you get to that point, and sometimes when you do get to that point, there's a powerful release of emotion. I've seen that many times, where
Yeah.
people these big ab reactions, lots of tears, lots of emotion. And it's quite scary for a person if they come across that the first time. But I always explain that you're accessing this memory and all this emotions coming up, and it's part of the healing process.
Right.
And it's such a powerful thing; it all comes out. Sometimes people feed back to me; they listen to one of my recordings, and the same thing happens. So while they're listening to the recording, they hit on something in the past, the trauma, and
Uh-huh.
it comes up and out. And I always explain that, it's kind of a good thing. You might feel a bit rough afterwards, but
Yeah.
you're releasing this trauma. And sure enough, always people say, after a few days it settled down and I felt lighter, I've cleared something. And that's a powerful way to do it.
So when we grow up, we grow up and we whether we grow up in it or somehow we become adults and we find ourselves in these relationships that are not healthy, Let's say, for example, I'm a woman out there watching, and I'm in a relationship with someone who's an alcoholic, and it's just a very toxic relationship, and we fight, and we have problems. We just can't seem to get it right. Do you think that these unhealthy relationships, the emotions that we experience, whether it be the frustration, whether it be the anger, the pain, do you think that we store that in our subconscious mind as well?
What, as an adult? So if you're in a relationship and you have a traumatic relationship with somebody, then do you store that at this time, do you mean, as an adult?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, everything that happens to you in life is imprinted on your unconscious mind. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes, it's locked away in there. As an adult, you have recollection of it.
Right.
I mean, saying that, sometimes if, there is a part of the brain that learns to dissociate from very, very painful memories.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes if you had some horrendous abuse or something terrible
Yeah.
happens, or even if you see something really traumatic, you can actually dissociate from it, and that memory is in your unconscious mind, but on a conscious level, you can't recall it. So you kind of blocked it out, and it's kind of the way the mind works to protect sometimes. But ultimately, to be able to heal those wounds, you need to access them again and process them. And I've spent 20 years doing that with self hypnosis, and working with different therapists. I kind of explored
Mm-hmm.
shamanism. I hung out in South America for a couple of years, and did a lot of clearing out there. Because for me, when you have a really, the childhood was like bad from the beginning all the way up to your teens and beyond. There's
Right.
a lot to heal. So for me, I'm still on that journey. I'm
Yeah. And I'm
having a
glad you
fantastic.
mentioned it's a journey. And there's some people watching right now, and they're probably thinking, wow, this hypnotherapist thing, that sounds really scary. And I don't know what road this Naomi chick is taking me on with this. Is there other tools that people who are in unhealthy relationships, or, who's having, anxiety, fear, anger, all these emotions that keep us from manifesting our best self, other tools that they can use if they're not ready to start hypnotherapy?
I mean, I think the thing there is that, if you're scared of hypnotherapy, you don't really understand it, because it's one of the safest methods of healing. It really is. I've never ever had a client in a one-to-one session that has, felt anxious after the session. People come in anxious before because they've only seen hypnosis in the media, or they've seen a stage show where the guys made people do outrageous things and had complete control of them. And the kind of hypnotherapy I do, it's not like that. And most professionally trained hypnotherapists you'll find in your local area, work in a very safe and nurturing way. And so, when I see clients, it's all about, kind of gently guiding them into a relaxed state where they're open and receptive, and they can, access the root cause of their.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had a little bit of difficulty as we were talking. Somehow we got disconnected, and I couldn't hear anything that Glenn was saying. So it's technology, and sometimes those type of things happened. So you guys have, I love other parts of Glenn's work, and one of the part of Glenn work that I've used a lot is it's like deep relaxation. Glenn, why don't you tell us a little bit about, you do the meditation, because I listen to the MP3 players, and you do deep relaxation. How can the deep relaxation help us with these emotions, and how can it help us overcome anxiety? Because like I said, I had a lot of anxiety problems. Anything makes me anxious. Change made me anxious. The thought of oh my God, I got to go out there in the world made me anxious. And when I started using your app, and I started, listening to meditation and going into deep stage, I feel like, okay, now I can take on my day. Like even this morning, coming on here to interview you was like nerve wracking. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to interview Glenn. And so I was able to pull up my MP3 and listen to it. And then I can say, okay, I can sit down now and have a conversation with Glenn and it'll be okay. So can you tell them a little bit about that that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the it's a coping strategy, isn't it? With my general relaxation recordings, I guide the listener into a very gentle, relaxed state of mind and body.
Right.
And I start with the breath. I always do a little introduction at the beginning. Don't use this
Uh-huh.
in a moving vehicle because I don't want people driving and going into a
Yeah.
trance. You know, so I use that at the beginning, and then I use the breathing technique. Because when you're anxious, the one thing people don't do is they don't breathe. They breathe very shallowly and up. They get
Yeah.
uptight, and their body, their physiologically, their physiology closes down. And so I always teach people to breathe slowly and as soon as you do that, you're having a little bit of control over the anxiety.
Right.
So just by breathing oxygen really deeply into your body and up to your brain, you're calming yourself and you're allowing yourself the space to think clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, that's always a good anchor. Just breathe in a slow, circular, deep breathing motion.
Right.
You will start to feel, a little bit calmer. You'll take the edge off it. And then, I always say, allow thoughts. Thoughts are going around your head at 10 to the dozen. Just allow those thoughts to become very still and calm and, let them drift away.
Mm-hmm.
And, you start to feel more and more in control. And that's, a really good way. So with the recordings, you can listen to them and get into that state. They take you into that
Yeah.
state. And you remember to do that when you're out in the real world, and you're actually in a stressful situation. You
Uh-huh.
remember the breathing. You remember to kind of think clearly, to think calmly and center yourself. And
Yeah.
I always do it whenever I've got a stressful situation or something where I need to really perform. I always do that, because it's such a powerful thing. And, whether you've got a driving test, you've got a speech to make, you
Mm-hmm.
want to go on a date and you want to impress someone, use these techniques because they're so powerful for getting you in the right state of mind and controlling any feelings of anxiety. And anyone can learn it. It's such a great tool that anyone can have.
So it's just basically being aware and being conscious enough to say, okay, I'm going to take a few minutes out of my day today,
Yeah.
to start my morning, because that's how I start my morning every morning is I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to do my breathing and I'm going to listen to this meditation tape. And that for me has been the process that worked. I want to go back to hypnotherapy because I really like that concept and I have used it and it has worked so well for me. Do you believe, in your professional opinion, that hypnotherapy actually helped raise our vibration?
Yeah. I mean, I think anything that takes you into your unconscious mind and helps you to clear dysfunction
Mm-hmm.
is helping you to raise your vibration. And a good example of that is when I was a kid, I drank, I smoked, I took drugs, I hung around with, people who are on the same vibrational energy as I was.
Right.
And everything was failure, it was problems, it was chaos everywhere. And, when I got into the band and I used to, I told this story a few times, I used to do interviews when I was in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And there was I was in a band of 7, and we go into a radio station to do an interview, and I couldn't speak because I had no voice. And the boys in the band would take the mickey out of me because all I would say is hello and goodbye. And I'd walk out, like a little rabbit. I didn't have a voice. And it was just a severe lack of confidence, a low vibrational energy. And now, I love doing it. I love speaking. But it took me a long time to find my voice. But it was
Right.
all
Right.
the healing that I did over the years that helped me to find my voice and find my energy and raise my vibration.
Yeah.
And that's it. And, I find with me, the journey has been, as I got clearer, as I started to, stop smoking, I started to exercise more. I
Yeah.
started to look after myself.
Yeah.
I'm a vegan as well nowadays. And I very rarely drink. Once in a blue moon I do.
Yeah.
And my brother's been staying here, and bless him, he does still drink and he still smokes, and we're kind of on a different wavelength, but we laugh a lot. And his vibration is different. It's where I was at, years ago.
Yeah,
You know,
I think before I got on the call with you, I was telling you that, I've experimented with, stuff in the inner city because I grew up there and it was so accessible to me. And, we would go off and we'd go smoke pot. And when I
yeah,
started, I actually moved from Florida and I was in Georgia and I was just starting to work on myself. I was starting to listen to meditation and I was just starting to say, okay, there has to be someone who can help me. And I had a cousin of mine who says, well, I'm going to drive down. We're going to come and see you. And I totally understand where you're at with your brother. And my vibration was so much higher. He said, you don't, and I'm like, please don't smoke that in my house. Like they were kind of shocked because, that's not who I was,
yeah,
and so it was through the work that I had done, seeing a hypnotherapist and it had really like raised my vibration to the point where now I was like, I really want to focus on my life. I really want to do better. If I can overcome this, I can overcome just about anything. So it does raises, my experience with it. It has been that it raises your vibration. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you about that.
yeah. And
Tell us a
you'd
little bit
never
about your
know.
meditation app.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you'd never know from
Yeah.
speaking to you now that you had that past,
No.
because your energy and your vibration is so different to where you were at back
Yeah.
then in those years. And you've done that through hypnotherapy, through healing.
Yeah.
And that's the point, that's the thing. Anyone can do that. It doesn't matter how stuck you are today, what hole you're in, if you're in a dreadful relationship, all you can do, you've got the power to work on yourself. If your
Right.
if your partner's, abusive or whatever they are, there's not a lot you can do about that, but you can change your inner self.
Yes.
And you will find that as you do that, as you change your inner self,
Yeah.
the people around you who are not congruent with where you're at as you move on will kind of fall away.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to meet different people of a, more, optimistic outlook and of a different vibration. And it really does work that way. You surround yourself with people who kind of, kind of get you or on the same frequency.
Yeah. And
And I love that, as I journey. And sometimes I meet people through Facebook who get in touch with me after 25, 30 years and I haven't seen them. And, they've been in prison, they've done all these things. And I say, what is it you do now? You're a healer. You're doing this, and they don't really get it.
right. They
They
can't
just
wrap.
remember his near little speak.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm actually going through the same thing right now because people are like, "What is it that you do? What is, I used to say, okay, when I turned 40 to all my friends, I said, "Guys, when I turn 40, we're going to go to Vegas. I'm going to throw this big party and I am going to get drunk and we're going to do all these amazing things." And so a couple of them got in touch with me right at my 40th birthday and they're like, "Hey, well, are we still doing that Vegas trip?" And I'm like, no, I'm actually going to go see the Reiki master today.
do you want to come with me?
Yes, exactly. Do you want to come with
Okay,
me?
all right.
I'm getting ready to go see the Reiki master. What is this healing thing that you're into? They don't understand the healing, the meditation, and oh, they want to stay up late, and I don't want to stay up late because now, I get up early in the morning and I meditate. And I have a friend who said to me, "I don't understand how you can sit in meditation for an hour. How do you do that?" And so it.
It's what because it's helped you move on, isn't it?
Right, right,
And anything that helps you move on, like it's like nectar, isn't it? You think, I
right,
want
right.
more of that. I
Yeah.
want to clear, I want to get clearer and
Oh
freer. And
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm 54 now, and I'm still looking for things that move me forward.
Yeah.
I've been more
And
successful than I could ever have dreamed, and I've got
right.
abundance of love that I never had years ago. But I still, there's people that are living a wonderful, blissful life on this planet, and
Yeah. And
but
when
they created it themselves.
Yeah, and when you become that person, and I love the way that you told my audience, you said, "Look, it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter what your spouse is doing and he's drinking or he's not making you happy. None of that matters. What matters is you, And I was telling my audience the last time I had another expert on there, and I said, my life didn't begin to change until I looked in the mirror and I saw that the common denominator in all of this dysfunction was me. And I actually titled this "Embrace the Mirror" because I had to look in the mirror and I had to accept what I saw, and that I was the common denominator in that, and that I couldn't change my abusive brother. I couldn't change my father. I couldn't change my mother. I couldn't change anybody. But what could I do to help me? And that's when my journey began. What could I do to help me to become better? And I think that a lot of people want to be better, but we don't manifest that better world, right, Glenn? Do I have this correct? We don't manifest that better world until we work on ourselves, until we become better, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And you have to work from the inside out, because it's not people or things that are going to make you better.
Right. Right.
It comes from working on your inner self. And if you had an abusive childhood,
Mm-hmm.
the key thing there is to nurture yourself, to really work on the healing aspect.
Yeah.
Heal those traumas from the past, and meditate on self-love. Give yourself the love that you never had as a child.
Yeah.
And that is such a powerful thing, because once you start doing that, your self-belief starts to grow, and it's little, it doesn't happen overnight. You've got to work on it.
Yeah.
And I always say, if you wanted to build a fantastic physique, you'd have to go to the gym 4 times.
Right. That is so true.
It's the same with this work.
Yes.
Put the effort in. For me, when I learned self-hypnosis for the first time and the law of attraction, I got into that about 20 years ago. And I used to meditate every day so deeply, because up to that point, my life had been a disaster. It had been failure after failure. And I was so hungry for change. I wanted to change my life so much.
Yes.
But I found this tool, and I used to lay down. And my ex-wife at the time, she said to me, I used to go so deep into trance that the bed would vibrate. And it was just because where I'd done it, I built up this energy, and I was actually emitting this vibrational energy that would make the bed move. And it was, I couldn't feel it myself, but she said she could feel this faint vibration.
Right.
And, I was so passionate for it, and I put so much into it. And that energy carried me through to where I'm at now, and in 2006, I signed a massive book deal with Orion here, one in McGraw-Hill in the States. I was a kid that got expelled from school and told I was useless.
Yeah.
And I ended up writing 7 books, and so that the momentum of all that meditation carried me through it. Nothing changed quickly. It wasn't overnight. I started meditating, and
Yeah.
You've got to work it over the years and keep doing things. Eat healthier, exercise more.
Right.
Do these things because they're in your control, and you will find that when you do that, your vibration will increase and life will change.
Yeah.
That's a journey anyone can go on, but you just got to get the fire up. You've got to get the desire in the first place. The hunger to change.
Definitely. And Glenn, do you believe that this journey is a lifelong? Because when I first started my journey, and I'll never forget, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get healed and things going to get so much better. And they did. But the better that they got, the more somewhere I'm going, can it be even better? Can it be even better? And so what I find is that I continue to do the work. I'm constantly, like you said, still looking for something that's going to help me, to where now I'm at that stage of my life. Okay, well, you've manifested this beautiful life. You went from, the kid in the inner city who, I used to live off of the school lunch. That was my only meal a day, to now where you make a 6-figure income, and you have a wonderful loving husband and a beautiful child, to now I find that my vibration is so much higher that I'm going, well, now it's time for me to start actually giving back. And then when you look back at the situations in your life, Glenn, do you look back and say, hey, every situation that I've been through actually got me to where I'm at, because that's how I feel about my life. Do you feel the same way about these challenges and these difficulties?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I look at where I'm at now and the journey that I've been on, and the being a therapist, all everything that happened to me has made me a better therapist. Because once you do start to go on that journey of healing and you move yourself forward and you break free of a lot of those chains, you then become good at helping other people do the same.
Yes.
Because you can say, "Oh, I had addictions, I had these problems, traumas, lack of self-esteem," and people understand, they know
Right.
when you've been there, they kind of get it, and so you kind of get a rapport with people fairly quickly because they know that you've not read it from a book and you're teaching them.
Right.
It's kind of that real life experience, and I believe it is a journey from birth to death that we are here to to improve our life and raise our vibration and to clear the dysfunction that whether it may be karma. We may have come into these abusive relationships when we were kids to heal karma.
Right.
I've met shamans and some very wise people who believe that's the case, and it kind of does make sense of it all. So the thing that we've got in our power is to learn to love and nurture ourselves and to be loving, kind, generous people.
Yeah.
And it's such a rewarding, uplifting thing when we can get into that.
Yeah, it is. And it actually changes your life. It changes your when I started my journey, it's funny that I heard you talk about how much time you would spend in meditation, just being in that meditative state. And I find when I was going through it too, I wanted it so bad that I would literally wake up and meditate for 2 hours before my and I used to tell my coworkers, they're like, "Why are you off in such a hurry?" I'm like, "Oh, I got a date." "Oh, who are you seeing?" And I wasn't dating anybody, but I was going to go into meditation because I was feeling like I was finally starting to get through. One last thing that I want you to talk about: how does the anger, because when we have these unhealthy relationship, we suffer with anger, and anger was one of my thing that I struggle with, as a matter
Yeah,
of.
me too. Me too. I mean, it's when you go through a childhood like that, when you become an adult, you think, well, how dare they? How dare they put me through that?
Yeah.
I've had this rage, and for years I've had it. And when I was a teenager, I was always getting in fights, and I was always,
Yeah.
and it kind of, I needed an outlet for it, and that was all I knew, to get into scraps and that kind of thing. But as an adult, I realized how toxic that anger was
Yeah.
and how it, didn't affect the people that had caused me the grief in the first place. They were
Right.
blissfully oblivious to it, living in their own little bubble. And, so I learned over the years, forgiveness is the big thing, and that's the hard one because
Yeah.
if somebody's caused you so much grief,
Yeah.
you can't just say, "Oh, I forgive you." It's something but you do have to work on it.
Right.
And
Right.
you find as you heal yourself more and more, being able to forgive does become easier because time moves on, and you have a little bit of perspective. In my case, the parents that I had that caused me all the problems were very dysfunctional, and when you look at their parents, they had the same issue, similar.
Right.
They grew up in dysfunctional
Yeah.
households.
It's
It just
it's it's a
perpetuated itself.
trend.
And what I realized was, I've got a chance here to break the cycle. I've got two kids
Yeah.
and I give them everything. I love them, I nurture them, I give them confidence, I do everything for them. I'd rather, you know, put them first than any career move or anything like that. And I do that
Yeah.
because I know, one of my sons is growing up and he's a great, well balanced kid. He has his traumas in life, he has issues, but as
Right.
soon as he
We
does,
all do.
yeah, he's on the phone to me and he talks to me about it, and I nurture and guide him. I give him everything that I never had.
Right.
But I love doing that. I love doing that, and he will, he'll be a fantastic parent when the time comes for him
Right.
because
Right.
he set the example. So I'm most proud of the fact that I've broken the family cycle,
Yeah.
So you've
And
got to look for things that help you to release the anger.
right.
Don't put your energy into that. If you have to release it, there are ways to do that in certain therapies. There's things like primal therapy,
Right.
which allows you to scream it out. And I touched on some of that, but I didn't actually go and see one, but I did. I kind of like that. I had a period where I used to sit in my hot tub in this garden I used to scream it out.
Right.
Everyone walked past. There's like Glenn Harrold, the therapist,
Yeah.
screaming hot tub. But it helped me. Helped me to
Yeah.
move at the anger. So it's good. You find ways to deal with it.
Right. So taking the time to I like what you're saying about, because I'm also raising a little one too, and I've been even more motivated, and I've been even looking for more tools to even raise my vibration. And I like what you said about, your son someday he's gonna be a great dad, and he's gonna know how, because he's had the training on how to raise his own family. And one of the thing with Embrace the Mirror that I'm trying to teach my audience is that we can change the story, right, Glenn? we
Totally, totally.
we
We've got
can.
that power within us, and you can do that. Whatever you've been through in the past, we've got this golden opportunity living in this world the way that we do to change things. Sometimes it's hard, because sometimes you get caught up in the anger, the bitterness of it.
Right.
If you do that, maybe allow yourself a little bit of time to do that, but don't let it linger. Don't dwell on it.
Right.
Look for ways to get yourself out of that.
Right.
And there are in this day, where the self-help industry is so big now, there are a million and one books out there. There are a million
Yeah.
and one recordings that can help you to do that.
Yeah.
For me, my biggest blessing is that I went through all that crap, all that trauma, but now I'm helping millions of people around the world to
Yeah.
break through theirs. And I feel I've found my path in life, and it's such a rewarding
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then when other people do that, I've helped people who've become freed up, and then they become hypnotherapists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cycle. It's a ripple. It's like goes
Yeah.
out there, and it's wonderful. And look
So
at you. What you're doing. Like
right. Right.
you're empowering people. And you've been through hell and back as a kid.
Right.
Anyone can do it.
Right,
Anyone.
it's true. And this is why when I'm putting these video series together, I'm always reading everyone's background and bio. And I have one of my expert who's going to be doing, I haven't interviewed her yet, but her name is Reverend Julie Morat, and she teaches this stuff. And but when talking to me, who has actually lived it, and she goes, I teach these stuff, and I teach self-love, and she's like, I can't believe that people don't know this stuff. And then she goes, for you to put this together, and you have lived it, and you know about, because I had low self-esteem. Well, no one taught me to love myself. I mean, my parents didn't even love themselves.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, and it took years of me working through that to understand that they just did the best that they could with the tools that they have.
Yeah, that's the greatest healing, that line there, because
Yeah.
if you understand that about them, it takes away a lot of the anger.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really lessen the anger for me. And so what I want to encourage people who's watching Embrace the Mirror to do is to look in the mirror and to say, hey, these things aren't good, aren't perfect. These things may not be the way that I want these things to be, but I'm in control of my life. I can take the first step, and that first step might be, ladies and gentlemen, to just go ahead and download um and download a meditation app by Glenn, and listen to that for 5 or 10 minutes. It's like taking baby steps, right, Glenn? You have to take
Absolutely.
small steps. And people
Yeah.
ask me, I have a friend who says, I can't even sit for 5 minutes, and you sit for 2 minutes. And I had to tell her, I didn't always sit in meditation for 2 hours. I sit for
No.
5 minutes, and it took 3 weeks to sit for 5 minutes. Because my mind is everywhere, right?
Yeah, and that's it. We're in this day and age, we're bombarded with information. We've got the internet, we've got mobile
Right.
phones, TV, film. So it's hard sometimes to switch off.
Right.
thing, with my recordings, when I start them up, I kind of make them very gentle and nurturing for people. So when they listen, they think, "Oh, this is quite nice."
Yeah.
And then what I do, I guide them down progressively into deeper and deeper states of mental and physical relaxation, but
Right.
in a very safe way. And I always
Right.
find, people, the reviews out there always say, "Oh, this, I didn't think it would work, but then, I slept like a baby last night and felt great afterwards."
Yeah.
So I've learned to put the recordings together in such a way that they do reach out to most people. And even if you've never meditated before, you can, get into it. You'll enjoy the experience because it will take you into a place that maybe you've not been before, and it's very calming and nurturing. And yeah, so
Yeah.
people feel good when they listen.
It's so great having you on here, Glenn. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. And one more time, Glenn, I'm gonna have you tell them who you are. How do they get a hold of you if they're interested in your work? How do they find you? How do they find these meditation app that they might want to download and start using this process to improve their life? Because I know there's somebody like that out there who's just a Naomi going, I just want some help. So so tell them how to get a hold of you.
So my website is www.glenharrold.com. So it's two N's, two R's. That's the main website. I've got few free guides to self hypnosis on there. But probably the best way is to go onto the App Store or the Android Store, either Apple or Android. Type in my name, and probably Relax and Sleep Well will come up first, which is a free recording, a free app that you download. There's 3 free giveaway recordings in there that people can listen to. And then there's all of my other apps, like 70 more in-apps that they can purchase if they like the free ones. And there's also a guide to self-hypnosis in there. So that little app has got everything within it that people can, start to experience self-hypnosis with, and hypnosis meditation. And yeah, so that's the best way on the App Store.
Right. And do you have a free gift for them today?
The mindfulness meditation for anxiety,
Oh,
which
wow.
is a recent recording that I've done with a colleague of mine called Ross Davey. He's created the music. Between us, we created the meditation, and it's really hitting the spot with people. We're getting so much good feedback on it.
Nice.
And that can be downloaded. So if you typed in mindfulness and my name on the App Store, that would come up top, and you can download that for free, listen to a free recording within it. And yes, that's a nice, gentle, nurturing, healing one.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you that are taking time to listen to these videos. Usually that's the first step, is to take time, to make the time to work on yourself. I am so glad to have you with us, Glenn. Thank you so much for coming on. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, I'm Naomi Sodomin, your relationship coach and your host. And good night. Thank you.
Thank you,
This was
Naomi.
great, Glenn.